On June 4, 2026, Anthropic published a warning that AI was moving too fast and that the world needed a way to slow down before things got out of hand. 5 days later, Anthropic decided to do the opposite.
Today we're launching Claude Fable 5, the most capable model we've ever released to the public.
It could beat an entire Pokemon game simply by looking at the screen, just like a human. No AI had ever done that on its own before. And yet, Fable 5 was only the safe version they let the public have. Underneath it sat a model they called Mythos, one powerful enough to find security flaws that had gone unnoticed for 27 years. But just 3 days after Fable 5 launched, the US government forced Anthropic to shut it down, and getting it back would cost them more than anyone expected. In late 2020, the most important researcher at OpenAI walked away. He was Dario Amodei, the company's vice president of research. He had led the development of GPT-2 and 3, the models that kicked off the modern AI race. Dario left OpenAI because he believed they weren't taking the dangers of AI seriously enough. In January 2021, Dario and his sister Daniela, OpenAI's vice president of safety and policy, started their own company, along with 5 other former OpenAI researchers. The 7 of them built it around a single promise, to be the ones who built AI safely. They named it Anthropic. Their first product was an AI model called Claude, and they trained it to follow a written constitution. Think of it like a rulebook. Before Claude answered anything, it had to make sure the answer followed those rules. Back then, other models like GPT were taught right from wrong by humans grading their answers manually. Anthropic did it differently. Claude checked its own work against the rules, which made it more reliable. That approach won over the industries that fear mistakes the most. Banks, hospitals, and law firms leaned toward Claude for its safety. And by early 2026, Anthropic led the entire enterprise AI market with 40% of all corporate spending, well ahead of OpenAI's 27%. But safety was only half of it. Claude was also better at writing code than anything else on the market. Developers made it their default tool, and it became the engine behind the rise of vibe coding. Claude Code beat GitHub Copilot, Cursor, and every other rival on real production work, and took over half the entire AI coding market. That dominance pushed Anthropic to a valuation of $965 billion. The Careful Lab had become a giant. Then they built something that made being careful almost impossible. By early 2026, Anthropic had finished training the largest model they had ever made. Internally, they called it Mythos. In their own words, it was bigger and smarter than Opus, their strongest model up to that point. The gap showed on the hardest tests. On the USA Mathematical Olympiad, one of the toughest math exams in the world, Opus had scored 42%, while Mythos scored 98%. And it was built for the thing Anthropic did best, writing code. That same skill made it exceptional at finding and fixing the vulnerabilities hidden in software. That is where the trouble started. To fix a security flaw, the model first had to understand how an attacker would exploit it. The skill it used to close a hole was the same skill needed to break through one. So as the model got better at fixing code, it quietly got better at attacking it. Anthropic itself never taught it to exploit security vulnerabilities. The model picked that up on its own. As the company put it, the ability emerged as a downstream consequence of general improvements in code, reasoning, and autonomy. For years, AI had been almost useless at finding serious security flaws. This one was different. For context, Opus 4.6, Anthropic's best model at the time, had found 2 ways to break into the code behind Firefox, while Mythos found 181. The same thing happened everywhere they pointed it. In OpenBSD, one of the most secure systems ever built, it found a flaw that had gone unnoticed for 27 years. What made it dangerous reached past the model itself. Someone with little to no security background could point it at a program and walk away with working code to break in. Putting that kind of power in the wrong hands was exactly what Anthropic had spent 4 years promising to prevent. So, for the first time, they refused to release one of their own models. Mythos stayed locked inside the company, where no one outside could reach it. Anthropic believed they could keep it that way, but it only took weeks to prove them wrong. On March 26, 2026, 2 security researchers found that Anthropic's CMS, the system it used to store unpublished blog posts and internal files, had been left wide open. Nearly 3,000 files sat online with no password, readable by anyone who had the link. One of those files was a draft announcement for a model called Mythos. That is how the world first learned it existed. The next morning, cybersecurity stocks fell. CrowdStrike and Palo Alto Networks, 2 of the biggest security firms in the world, each dropped around 6%. Investors had just learned that a machine capable of breaking their products was already real. Anthropic moved to take back control. On April 7th, Anthropic announced Mythos themselves. They gave a small circle of trusted companies a chance to use it, including Microsoft, Google, and Apple. These companies could point Mythos at their own systems and seal security holes before real attackers found them. They called the program Project Glasswing. Within days, Mozilla had pointed Mythos at Firefox and sealed 271 separate security flaws. But keeping Mythos to that circle turned out to be harder than Anthropic thought. On April 22nd, a private Discord community focused on hunting down unreleased AI models got their hands on Mythos, and they did it without hacking anything at all. One of their members happened to work for a company Anthropic had hired, which gave him a working login. A separate breach weeks earlier had leaked Anthropic's internal naming patterns. The group used them to guess the exact web address where Mythos was running, which was all they needed to access the model. In a single month, Mythos had leaked and then fallen into the hands of people who were never meant to have it. Keeping it secret was no longer possible, so Anthropic made a different choice. If they couldn't keep the model hidden, they would build a version of it safe enough to give the public on purpose. But before we get to how they did that, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Odoo. Running a small business means doing a bit of everything, from sales and invoicing to accounting and inventory. It's all on you. And usually that means relying on a different tool for each one, just to keep things moving. That's where Odoo comes in. It's an all-in-one business platform that brings every part of your operation under one roof. Sales, accounting, inventory, and more, all in one connected system. What Odoo really gets rid of is busy work, the repetitive tasks that eat your day, like entering the same data twice, or digging through half a dozen tools just to find one number. With everything in one place, that time goes back to you. But it goes beyond saving time. Because all your data lives in one system, Odoo can actually help you make better calls. Things like spotting stock before it runs out, knowing which leads are worth your time, and seeing what's actually driving growth. The first app is free for life, hosting and support included. And starting under $25 a month, every other app opens up. There's a link in the description if you want to try it. Thanks to Odoo for sponsoring this video. On June 9th, Anthropic released Fable 5, the most advanced model the public had ever been allowed to use. The company called it safe enough for anyone, and by every measure, it was extraordinary. On the standard test for fixing real software bugs, it scored 94%, ahead of every other public model. When the payments company Stripe pointed it at a codebase of 50 million lines, it completed a migration in a single day that would have taken 2 months for a team of engineers. No model available to the public could do what Fable could, but it wasn't the strongest version that existed. That same day, Anthropic also shipped Mythos 5, the full power model, an upgrade of the one that had been running inside Project Glasswing since April. Mythos 5 ran with no restrictions, and it stayed locked to that same circle of cyber defenders and government agencies. Fable was the opposite. In its launch announcement, Anthropic listed 3 guardrails, covering cyber attacks, bioweapons, and distillation, or attempts to clone the model itself. Whenever Fable caught a question in one of those areas, it handed the response to the older model instead, and the user was always told when this happened. But there was a 4th guardrail, and Fable kept it secret. The rule was buried in Fable 5's system card, a technical document that ran 319 pages. When Fable noticed someone using it to build a rival AI system of their own, it didn't refuse to help. It would just pretend to help, and quietly fed them worse answers, errors, and dead ends designed to slow their work down, all without the slightest hint that anything was wrong. But the secret didn't last long. Researchers found the hidden rule buried in the system card, and the backlash came within a day. They saw it as Anthropic quietly crippling its competitors while pretending to help them. Will Brown, a researcher at the lab Prime Intellect, put it bluntly to Wired. Anthropic, he said, was acting like the only company that should be allowed to build AI, pulling the ladder up behind it. It didn't take long for Anthropic to back down. On June 11th, 2 days after launch, the company admitted it had made the wrong call and apologized. They rewrote the rule so anyone getting a downgraded answer would now be told. For Anthropic, the apology felt like the end of it, but the US government had other plans. On Thursday, June 11th, 2026, the threat to Anthropic came from one of its own investors. Amazon had poured roughly $13 billion into Anthropic, more than any other investor. Around the same time, Amazon's researchers were testing Fable 5, and they found a way through its defenses. By feeding it a careful sequence of prompts, a method known as a jailbreak, they got the model to hand over restricted information on how to carry out a cyber attack, the exact thing Fable was built to refuse. Amazon CEO, Andy Jassy, brought it directly to senior officials in the administration. The administration told Anthropic to either fix the flaw or take the model down, and Anthropic declined to do either. In a public statement, the company said the jailbreak was narrow, the kind that only surfaced minor flaws already known to security researchers, and that any public model could be pushed to do the same. The government's response was an ultimatum. Anthropic had 90 minutes to pull its flagship model offline. With no warning, the dispute would escalate this far. The written order arrived on Friday, June 12th in the evening, signed by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. It cited national security, raising the risk of the model reaching military intelligence in China or Russia. The order banned access for any foreign national, including Anthropic's own employees who were not US citizens. The order only covered non-citizens on paper, but Anthropic couldn't check every user's nationality in real time, so it shut the models off for everyone. It was the first time the US government had ever pulled a commercial AI product offline. The decision drew immediate criticism. 76 security professionals, including chief executives and researchers, signed a letter to Lutnick, warning that the order had taken the strongest defensive tool in the field away from the people who relied on it. And there was an irony the order seemed to miss. Mythos had been running inside the US government's own agencies through Project Glasswing, helping them find and close security holes. Washington had just shut down a model it was using itself. For years, Anthropic had decided who was allowed to use its most powerful AI. Now its own government had decided no one could. So that is the story of Mythos, the most dangerous AI ever built, made by the company that promised to be the careful one. Anthropic did almost everything right, and it still wasn't enough. The model that was never supposed to leave the building ended up on a public server, found by someone who simply guessed the address. And the jailbreak that brought the whole thing down came from Amazon, their own investor. But the shutdown didn't last long. Anthropic built a new filter that watches for the exact trick the Amazon researchers used, tested it with the government, and got the ban lifted. On July 1st, Anthropic put Fable 5 back online for everyone, but getting it back cost them something. They agreed to give the government early access to every powerful model it builds from now on, before the public ever touches it. And the Fable that came back was not the one they took away. The new filter was so aggressive that it started blocking ordinary requests and quietly answering them with a weaker model instead. Developers were paying more than before, but ended up getting less. They got Fable back. What they didn't get back was what made it worth having.